Hello, hello. I'm back in the States. It's Nichole.
Hi, Nichole.
Who are you?
I'm your sister. Your younger sister.
Oh my, Gabby,
9.
no, you need to get with it. You need to get with it.
Okay.
Fucking introduce yourself. We're not, no. You don't have much to do today.
In my defense, you guys, today, well, I'm Gabrielle Celeste. Nice to be here with you again after
Before
3
you
weeks.
talk, okay, but before you tell us your sob story,
Mhm.
we also have somebody with us.
Hi.
Hi. Who do we have? Who's with us?
Me, Elizabeth. I was like, do I introduce myself or
Elizabeth?
Hi.
Hi, Elizabeth.
I'm so excited to be on here with you guys. I love listening to your guys' episodes. Like,
I'm
I
so
listen to you
excited
guys on the
said
drive
yes.
home. So excited.
Yay. Yeah. So we just kind of wanted you to come on, just to come on. I was like, hey, do you want to like do an episode with us just because? And you're like, sure. And it worked out because we just talked about it, like not even a week ago?
I was like, I'm down. Let's do it. Sounds like fun.
Yeah. So we'll talk about how we know each other, but do we want to hear Gabby's sob story first?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Gabby.
Oh, you're so mean to me, Nichole. You are so mean to me when I'm like the most vulnerable and sensitive.
I just told you, I don't know if Elizabeth heard before we recorded. I was like, I can't go through it with you. Like, don't drag me down with you. So
that's the thing. It's like, I think it's because it has to be something in our chart, but I know it's because I'm a generator in human design, and in my chart specifically, it's like if I'm going down, like the people around me really feel it. But
she fucking brings everybody down with her, and I'm like, I can't go there. I have too much shit going on. I just got back in this country.
She did. I know this bitch over here. I was like, my codependent ass. I was like, I miss you. Like, you call me once a week. She's not around. She doesn't text me back. Like, what the fuck? You can't move. I've said that 3 times, but I mean it.
Well, and I missed Elizabeth too because she even messaged me when I was gone, and she was like, I don't want to bug you. And I'm like, can you please bug me? Like, it's not even bugging. Like, I just need a distraction from my family. I love my family, but sometimes I need other people to talk to. So everybody that kept telling me they were sorry, I'm like, can you not be sorry? And can you please message me? Thank you.
Wait, I want to hear about your trip too, though. We haven't even talked about it.
It was 3 weeks. So my clothes got shrunk from the laundromat. My son's socks got shrunk, and it was hot. It was humid, and we're back.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll make my sob story quick. I missed you, and I'm so fucking over this ego death, and we're halfway through summer as of today, and I've been waiting for this fucking transit for the last 14 months, and I'm frustrated, and I'm ready for it to be done, and I really feel like I'll be done with it we're in August, so like September. So yeah, that's just where I'm at. I'm just like, I just don't feel good. That's it. That's all. That's my sob story.
Okay. What were we going to say earlier, Elizabeth, though?
I was just going to say, you had to tell me like 3 times to be like, no, text me. Text me. And I'm like, I know, but I feel like I'm intruding. Usually when I'm on vacation, I like hardly look at my phone. So
but it was 3 weeks. Like I needed people.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a long time.
Yeah, I needed peopling really bad. So
Elizabeth, how do we know each other?
We know
in this lifetime or in the other lifetime?
Oh,
you know both.
I still have to do a reading on you, Nichole, because I did one for Gabby, and like we're all friends from a long time ago. But in this lifetime, we met through Intuition School, Soul Reader,
Intuition Academy,
Intuition Academy, Psychic School, all of the above.
No, we don't call that.
Nichole doesn't call it that.
Oh, I know you guys. I remember you guys saying like Intuition Academy or Psychic School or all of the above. So, yeah, me and Nichole were schoolmates together.
And how did we meet, Elizabeth?
I slid into your DMs.
She slid into my DMs.
I don't know. They had like the replay of all the videos, and I was like, ooh, she sounds interesting, and like she's in California. And then I was like, just unabashedly like, hey, like I want to make friends too and everything, and it's been such a fun experience. And then obviously I got introduced to Gabby, and it's been a lot of fun.
Because we're a package deal, huh?
Yeah.
Well, we've said it before. Like, we just share friends.
We do.
So I
Like
wasn't
the
gonna,
legit, like Mary Kate and Ashley spiritual sisters.
Oh shit! Does that mean we need to start smoking? Like, do we
No.
like get all?
Oh no.
No. Okay.
I don't know
Good.
about that.
Okay. Good. Yeah. So we met, and then you actually were working with one of Gabby's friends, also. So we ended up all just kind of knowing each other, and then we met in person.
May.
But what was that event?
It was like a curandera like dance for.
It was like
was really
Aztec
cool.
dancing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really cool. So yeah, we met there. And then you recently did a reading and found out you and Gabby have been together in many lifetimes. So let's talk about that real quick.
Oh my god. Elizabeth,
Yeah.
tell the story better.
I mean, it's kind of been a really wild story. Because I don't even know where to start, Gabby. Let's just say, like, we've been friends, like, on a soul level many times. Gabby has a lot of work to do here on Earth to just kind of, like, help raise the vibration. I don't know how much to say, but...
Yeah, whatever you want.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's, like, sensitive or not sensitive, but, you know, basically having, like, the mission to, like, make the Earth a better place for everybody. And I guess through our adventures, we've kind of like been friends. Gabby sent out a call and I was like, yeah, I'll come to Earth and like help out with this giant mission. Very like Star Wars, you know, fantasy almost, but it's not though, because I would text Gabby like in these few months and like Gabby would say certain things and I'm like, why do I all of a sudden like want to work out? Like, and then I started working out and then like things would resonate when she would say something and I'm like, yeah, she's right. I'm going to start doing this. So it almost felt like an activation of sorts. And it started getting so coincidental where like, I was like, no, this has to be more than just, you know, a fluke.
And you did a couple of readings. Well, you did a few readings for me when we were in Intuition Academy. I forgot the name. I blanked on the
Soul
name
Reader
for a little bit.
Method.
Soul Reading Method.
Yeah.
And you are so good. Like you are so fucking talented and just gifted and yes. Like
Aw.
you did like you did a few for me and they were just so on point. And for those of you that have listened to the Akashic Records reading episode, I did the reading with Ashley and I hadn't told anybody about it. And Elizabeth did a reading, and I think I even mentioned it in there how someone else did a reading and got almost the exact same thing. And so that was you, Elizabeth, that did the reading after Ashley. And so
it was such a trip.
Yeah.
Like to find out when you told me, I was like, no way. Because at that time, we were just getting into like the whole intuition school. So, you know, I haven't like built the confidence that I have now. And I'm still building it, but thank you.
You're so good. You were so good. Like
Aww.
I loved getting readings from you.
Thank you.
And I just loved meeting you, period. So that was the bonus.
Yeah.
We were talking about that the other day. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's definitely like fast friends. Like it just clicked. I'd say with all of us.
Right. Yeah. And the other day I was talking to Gabby when I was on vacation and I was going through it that day. And then I was just saying how the soul reading method almost like did the opposite for me than what I like wanted it to do. And I kind of came out questioning if I even want to do this more. And then she was saying something and I don't remember what it was. And I said, well, but no, like I said, the only good thing that came out of it was like I met Elizabeth and she was like, stop being negative. And I'm like, that's not negative. Like sometimes things are just, you know, like what they are. And so maybe like I went in there to like meet her, you know, and then come to find out you guys have, you know, these past lives together. So I was like, that's not like a bad thing. Like it was a good thing. Like I wasn't trying to be like super down about it that day. But yeah, I think you were, for me, like the best thing that came out of that. Because yeah, I don't even know about the readings. Like
I think you're an integration, Nichole. I think you're being so hard on yourself, but that's like something that I think we're all pretty good at doing, is like we're the worst when it comes to that. Like no one else needs to do it because we do it just fine for ourselves on our own.
Yeah.
I feel the same
But-
way too. Like, I actually felt more lost after Soul Reader 2. Like, I was telling Gabby, like, it felt like, and even Yvette, who we all know,
She'll be
I
on the
was
pod at some
telling
point.
them, I know, one day.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, I had mentioned that, like, it felt like my gifts went on vacation. Because after, yeah, because after we graduated, it was like I couldn't tap in. If I tried, like, I would get a headache. Like,
I
it
haven't
was
even
almost
tried to.
yeah, and so I'm slowly starting to tap in again. But it's been a very different way. Like I've actually in my own journey, like honoring my ancestral lineage has allowed is almost like opening the doors again. But aside from that, it's just been kind of like I don't really know where to go. I don't really know what the next step is, but also kind of a fun journey because like I play with Gabby with like astrology and like I do readings and stuff and it's just so far out and I listen to your guys' podcast and it just kind of resonates things within me where I'm like starting to look up aliens and like all the stuff. So it's just been kind of like play versus kind of being more serious, like business minded about it, which I know you and I, Nichole, have been working on.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're in a group thread with a bunch of girls. And so I think that sometimes messes with me because I'm like, oh, look if they're all getting started and like they're all in it. And I'm just kind of like, I'm just kind of sitting from the sidelines, like reading everything.
Same.
Not really contributing. Yeah. Yeah. We're pretty quiet in there. But
yeah,
that'll change, you guys. Like it's all timing, and you guys are like, I actually feel like you guys are doing it in a very healthy way, whereas like I know I've said this, I haven't, and like my body took a hit, and integration, like being so slow with yourself and like giving yourself that time, it's going to pay off in the long runs because you're going to be able to take like leaps and bounds, whereas like if you just get into it, I'm telling you, it's going to catch up to you at some point. So I really respect the way that you guys are doing it, and I wish I would have done that. Looking back,
living vicariously through us.
definitely.
yeah.
So Elizabeth, you mentioned something about how like when you listen to the show, like it's bringing up things and you're like researching, and you mentioned like aliens. And so the episode today is an alien abduction episode, and we had kind of talked a little bit after the alien episodes with Michelle, and that's when I was like, hey Elizabeth, do you want to just like come and listen to me tell my favorite alien story?
I was like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
I didn't know this was your favorite,
So,
Nichole.
This is my favorite. And so I know you don't know, Gabby.
Mm-mm.
Elizabeth, do you know the story of Travis Walton, The Fire in the Sky?
I know that there's a book about it. I think one of my close friends read it, but I don't know much. I actually was scared at that time. And I used to think like everything's like doomsday. And when you guys did your episode with Michelle, I was like, oh my God, it's bringing back so many memories. So I'm excited to dive in.
Okay, so let's dive in because I know Gabby's hungry and I'm a mess. I'm looking at myself right now. I'm like, oh my gosh, when we release these videos, I did my skincare routine, and so I'm not sweaty. This is moisture.
This is going on YouTube, guys.
I know. That's why I need to explain. I'm not just sitting here sweating. Okay, so I did so much research because I love this story. So I heard about this back. Yeah. Gabby, what year were you born?
92. Aging myself.
Yeah, so you would have been, shut up, because you would have been like a year and I was watching this alien abduction movie. So
At like 8.
it was so good. Yeah. So anyway, well, I didn't have the best parenting. So
Yeah.
I was also forced to watch Child's Play when I was like 6 or 7, and I fucking hate dolls.
I feel like our parents are the same, but like different childhood, guys. So we just have to put that out there.
Well, no, I grew up with a totally different parent. That was
right, which I feel like we had to clarify on the pod.
Yeah, awful.
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I watched this movie, and it used to be like on TV, I think. When I was doing the research, they mentioned that it was an HBO film. So I don't know how I watched it, but I loved it, and I was always so fascinated by it. And it was one of those stories that I believed outright. And I don't know if I believed it outright because I was, 10 or whatever, however old I was. But so when we're done, when I'm done, I want you to tell me what you guys think. Okay.
Wait,
Mhm.
before we start, Elizabeth, do you believe in aliens?
Oh yeah, Bigfoot,
Yeah, okay.
aliens, mermaids, all of the above. I mean, why not though? Like, why not have some magic in your life? And like,
Aw.
even if they may not exist, like, yeah, like people say they may not exist, but I think the belief in them could probably cause them to exist. Also, to what Nichole says, like, how can we be a tiny little speck in the world or the universe,
So true.
and we're the only ones? Like, come on.
Mm-hmm.
So yes,
Yeah.
I do.
Love it.
Okay. So this is the story of Travis Walton, which then later prompted the book Fire in the Sky, which he wrote, and then prompted the movie Fire in the Sky, which I still highly recommend. Okay. So this happened back in 1975. So the date was November 5th. So Travis Walton, he was part of this like logging crew. And so his best friend, his name was Mike Rogers. He was the crew boss of the logging crew. And there were 7 guys total. So it was Travis Walton, Mike Rogers, the boss. It was Ken Peterson, John Goulet, Alan Dallas, Dwayne Smith, and then there was Steve Pierce, and he was the youngest. He said he was probably like 17 years old, and he actually lied about his age to get the job. So he was the baby of the group. So there was these 7 guys, and they were working in Arizona in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. And so their job was to like clear out a bunch of the trees to prevent like fire hazards and just they were doing a lot of really good work. And so it was the end of the day, and I forgot which one of them. It might have been Ken Peterson. It was either Ken Peterson or John Goulet because I watched a documentary. One of them tried calling out that day. Like one of them was sick and wasn't feeling good, and they were like, I can't come in. And the boss was like, I need you. You have to come in. So he went in, and he was like, man, if I would have like called out sick, I would have like missed this crazy day. So they were done for the day, and they were all driving in like one truck. So 7 of them, because back in the day, right, you would just hang out like in the bed of the truck.
Mm-hmm.
So they were all in the truck, and they noticed like a glowing light in the sky. And so they all kind of like noticed it around the same time. And so they started driving like alongside of it to just kind of get a closer look. And Travis Walton was in the front seat. So there were 3 guys in the front seat. He jumped out, and he like started running towards the light. And they were like, no, like, what are you doing? Because then they kind of heard it like a little bit of like a buzzing noise. And then all of a sudden there was this like flash, like a super bright flash that like a blinding flash. They couldn't see what it was, but it was so bright. Well, he got like knocked through the air. So they saw his like body flying. Like they said he almost looked like a rag doll. They're like, he didn't look like he had any bones in his body. Like it just like violently like threw him to the ground. So they thought he was dead because they were like the way he hit the ground and like how violent it was. Like it was bad. And they said it was like a bluish green colored light. So yeah, they were like freaked out. They're like, oh shit, he's dead. And they left. Like they drove off. And so like about a quarter of the mile. What?
They just left him there? Like, what the fuck?
I know. So about a quarter of the mile away though, so they didn't get very far. Mike stopped, and he's like, we have to go back. Like they were best friends. They were actually brother-in-laws too, because Mike was married to one of Travis's sisters. So he's like, we have to go back. And some of the guys were like, we're not fucking going back. Like we didn't, like, what was that? So they kind of argued for like 15 minutes. And so Mike was like, we're going back. And if you guys don't want to go back, you can stay here and wait for us. But like I'm going back, and whoever wants to come can come. So
I'd go back for you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I wouldn't leave you to begin with.
Oh, good answer.
I would probably leave. I'm scared of everything. But so it's funny because they were talking about that too. And like, well, were you upset when you heard that they left you? And Travis was like, no. He's like, honestly, like, I probably would have done the same. Like, if they thought I was dead, like, what can you do? But a lot of or not a lot, but some of like Travis's family members were really pissed because Mike was his best friend and brother-in-law. Like, how could you like leave him? Right. But
Yeah.
honestly, like, people never know what they're going to do in the moment, right? Like, you
For
can
sure.
say you're going to do one thing, but like when that happens, like, you don't know, right? You don't know what you're actually going to do. So I would probably leave you, Gabby. Sorry. I would like to think I wouldn't, but I probably would. So anyway, so they go back and he was gone. They were like, oh shit, like where is he, There was no footprints, so they saw the boot print of like when he jumped out of the car, but there were no footprints like showing that he had run off. There were no tire tracks showing that like maybe another car came and got him. Like there was nothing. So they were like, okay, like where the fuck did he go? So they didn't know. They were like, well, do we tell? Do we call the police? Like they're gonna think we're crazy because they all kind of agreed that they had seen a craft. So one of the guys was like, yeah, we have to tell the police what we saw. So they did. They get back into town and they tell the police, what had happened. And they had said that the sheriff was like very sheriffy, right? So very like skeptical, very like logical. And he was always kind of like, he always remained pretty skeptical in public, but they also said that he was open to the possibility that it could have happened because he had also had, they found out after the fact, like a sighting himself, like kind of like recently in the like few years before it happened. So they said because he had had that sighting, it like allowed him to okay the search, right? So the search was like really thorough. They said they called out, they had dogs, they had helicopters. So they think that maybe if he hadn't have had those sightings, that they would have just been like, you guys are full of shit, you guys are drunk, you guys are high, whatever, right? Like this didn't happen. But they started like a full-on search. So one of the guys, John Gillette, I watched his documentary on it, and he had said that when they went to go search also the next day, they split the whole group up, right? So there was 6 guys at that point. And like one of the deputies said to him, like, we can just speed this up if you just tell us where the body is. So they had thought that law enforcement thought that the crew murdered Travis. So that started kind of being the rumor. And they said that like some of the family members were split. So some thought, yeah, you guys murdered him. Some thought, no, we believe your story. Like, so it was kind of split down the middle. And they said even the town, they said there was about maybe 3,000 people in town, and it was kind of split down the middle, where some people were like, yeah, we believe it, because they were saying that out in like Arizona, right in that area, there's just a lot of open sky. So sightings weren't necessarily that unheard of, right? Sightings were kind of not normal, but it wasn't that
It's like
out
an
of the realm of
unspoken
possibility.
truth or
Kind
unspoken
of,
thing.
yeah. So about a few days in, they all took polygraphs. So there were 6 guys, and they all took polygraphs. And they didn't have to, but like they wanted to, because they're like, well, now we're being like accused of murder. They hadn't been arrested or like formally charged, but like the rumors were that they murdered him. And one of the guys, Alan Dallas, him and Travis had some like issues recently. And Alan Dallas was kind of a difficult person. They said he like had run-ins with like law enforcement. He, like he was just like a difficult person to get along with. And Mike Rogers had even said that they had thrown blows like not that long before. So the idea that maybe something happened was like, kind of a possibility because of the way this guy was. But then the other piece was like, well, why would we all cover for him? Like everybody has issues with him. Like why would we be, like covering his back if something really happened? So anyway, the polygraph examiner noticed that the guy Steve Pierce, the one that was really young, that he was like super nervous, right? And so he's like, all right, I'm going to test him first because if something happened, he's going to crack. Like, and then I won't even have to test everybody else because like he's going to give it to me, right? So he tested him and like he passed. And he was like, oh shit, like, okay. So then he had to test everybody else and everybody passed. Every single one of them, all 6 of them passed. And they said the odds of everybody to pass that test with the results that they did, because I guess there's like different degrees of passing, right? So they said everybody passed to like the highest degree. And they said the odds of that happening were like 1,000,000 to 1.
Wow.
And so there was one inconclusive, but not because he was lying, but it was that Alan Dallas guy because he didn't finish it. So, right, I mentioned he had issues with law enforcement. He was like, well, like, fuck the police, fuck this polygraph guy. And he just got into it with the polygraph guy and he left. So his was inconclusive only because he didn't finish it. But they did say that the questions that they did ask, like he was being truthful about those, even though they didn't get the full like past result. And I think they said that was like day 5, like 5 days into it. So he was gone for 5 days. And so then Travis said he like woke up and he was in like a hospital kind of room. Like he said there was like a bright light and he felt like he was laying down on something. He said it didn't feel like a bed. It felt like a really hard like table. And he was in pain. And so he was like, oh shit, like I remember being hit. I must be like in a hospital, right? Because I must have hurt myself. And so he woke up and there were these like beings in the room. And he said they were like short humanoid with large craniums and they were bald. And he said they were about like 4 feet tall. And mind you, he's in pain, right? He's like super weak. And he said he got like really scared and he started kind of like lashing out and he was like strapped down with something, right? Like he had a strap, but he was able to kind of get free from the strap. And he was like so weak, but he like pushed and they fell. And so he's like, well, like I'm pretty weak right now. And I just pushed them over. And he said they were kind of like soft and like spongy. So eventually, like the beans left the room right after he knocked him down. So then he took off running because they didn't close the door or anything. So he took off running down the hall. And he said there was a bunch of buttons and he was like pushing all the buttons, trying to figure out like, okay, maybe a door is going to open somewhere, right? Like they didn't lock me in the room. And so he said someone else walked in that kind of looked human, but he was wearing a helmet. And so he was like, where am I? Like, what's going on? And the guy wasn't answering him. And he said that he looked human, but he said there was something odd about his eyes. And he didn't really describe what, but the guy never like said anything back to him. And so the guy just like motioned for him, like, okay, come with me now. And so he like let him out of like a craft that he said was either parked inside of like a hangar or was parked in like a larger craft. So he wasn't really quite sure because mind you, he's been like unconscious. And then they went into a room and then there were like more humans, but they weren't wearing helmets. So he was again like, okay, what's going on? And he said that the air was easier to breathe when he got in that room, which was probably why they weren't wearing helmets. So then, right, they're just like ignoring him. No one's saying anything. They force him down. And again, he's still weak. So it didn't take a lot for them to force him down. And then they put a mask over his face. And then he got knocked out again. So he said maybe he kind of estimated that he was conscious for like maybe 2 hours of the whole 5 days he was gone. So he doesn't remember anything else. And next thing he knows, he wakes up on the side of the road, like on this highway. And he said he saw the craft like leaving. So it had like dropped him off and then it like left. So he was like, okay, like, what do I do now? And he said he had to walk a little bit to kind of figure out where he was until he came to. And then so he called one of his brother-in-laws. And so it wasn't Mike Rogers, it was a different brother-in-law. So he called him, and that brother-in-law and then one of his brothers came to pick him up. And he had lost like 10 pounds. And he said he didn't remember like eating or drinking anything, right, the whole time he was gone. And so he was trying to tell his brother like what happened, and he was trying to explain, but he just said it was like too traumatic, and his story was like all over the place. And his brother was like, yeah, like mom was so worried, and was just like telling him these things. And Travis was like super confused. He was like, what do you mean like mom's worried? Because he thought it was the same night, because so much time had passed and because he was unconscious for most of it. He's like, wait, what do you mean it's been 5 days? I think they said it was like 5 days and 6 hours total. And then he felt like his face, and he was like, oh shit, I have like 5 days worth of like facial hair growth. So his brother took him to this like hospital in Phoenix to see if he was okay, right? Because he had lost so much weight. Like he didn't look like he was doing very well. And they ran a bunch of tests, and they said like there wasn't any like food, right? Like in his stomach. So like he hadn't eaten anything. And then they also ran drug tests. Like they did some drug screening to see if like, was he on something, right? And nothing. Like they didn't find anything in his system. And so Steve Pierce, the young guy, the one that the polygraph examiner tested first, he said when he heard that he had returned, he like looked at his mom and he's like, see, I told you we didn't kill him, because people thought that like they had killed him. And so he's in the hospital for a few days. Yeah, for a few days. And I think Mike said he didn't hear from him. He didn't hear he was back until a day or so after. So he said there was a bunch of like newspapers, like just, at the hospital trying to camp out and see what was happening. And there's a picture where they're all holding checks, like all 7 of them. So I guess the National Enquirer awarded them like $5,000. I don't know if it was each or total for the best UFO case of the year, because they were like, well, they passed the polygraph test. Like, this has to be true. So actually, and I don't think I put it in the notes, but Travis took a polygraph test when he was returned. And that one he didn't pass, but it wasn't that he was lying. When they went back and kind of looked at the results later, they had kind of determined like he probably shouldn't have even taken this test, right? Because he was still like traumatized, right? It was still so recent. Like it was just like within days or weeks of the incident happening. And back then, right, they didn't know anything about PTSD. Like PTSD wasn't even called PTSD back then, right? So like they didn't really understand trauma. So he had taken that one and he didn't pass it. But again, it wasn't because he was being like deceitful, but it was just like I'm guessing his whatever they're testing was just like spiked the entire time. So what happened? Okay. So then there was a bunch of skeptics, right? Once he comes back, they're like, okay, where was he? The great story, right? This is super believable. Like just, you know, a lot of skeptics. So there was this one guy, he was like a researcher, but he was a debunker. So he was constantly trying to just debunk any kind of UFO stories. So he also was in the camp of, yeah, this is a hoax. He's just trying to get money. And he was trying to find all these like discrepancies in the stories from all the 7 guys. But one of the things that I had come across was that the stories were like very similar and they rarely change. Like the stories have been really consistent. This happened in 75. So what was that? Like almost 50 years ago? The stories haven't changed. Like his story is the same. And so we know we hear when people are being dishonest, right? They like forget the stories that they've told. And so the story changes a little bit. These have stayed like almost exactly the same. So this guy was trying to debunk it, right? This is a hoax. This didn't happen. So then he was trying to say that the polygraphs were like poorly administered, and then he was saying that Travis had like tried to what do they call, like tried to cheat the test. What do they say when they're talking about polygraphs?
Cheat, right?
Trying to like beat it,
Stray
cheat
influence?
it.
Influence?
Yeah.
Influence, yeah. So like saying he was like holding his breath, and then again talking about that earlier test that he had failed, but when they went back and looked at it, they were like, yeah, whoever examined him like shouldn't even have examined him, like they should have given it to him, period. So people were like, man, he had like a personal like vendetta against like Travis Walton because he was just doing like everything he could to discredit him. And then in the documentary I watched, the people that were talking about him were saying like if he couldn't tear apart the findings, he would like tear apart somebody's character. So that's what started happening, right? Like there wasn't any holes in the story, especially with everybody having passed the test. They were like, okay, like he couldn't do anything, right? So at some point, all 7 of the guys sent him a letter, and they were like, and they all signed it. They're like, okay, we'll take another polygraph test, but it has to be an examiner that we both sides agree on, right? And the stipulation was if we pass, you have to pay for all of the test results or for all the tests, right? And if we fail, like we'll pay for the tests ourselves. So, I mean, it seemed like pretty fair.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they never heard back from him. So they like he never took them up on the offer. So what he was trying to say was that Mike Rogers had this contract. So that was why they had that 7-man crew. So that contract was like a government contract to clear out the forest. So he had said that he was having trouble, like maybe meeting the deadlines or something, and that he was trying to get out of the contract. And that was his way of getting out of it by creating this whole story. So then he was like, yeah, I know what happened. Travis just like hung out in this cabin for 5 days and he just kind of waited it out. And when Travis was discovered and went to the hospital, they had found like a puncture wound in his like right elbow area, I think. And this guy, Philip Klass, had said, oh, that's where he was injecting LSD during the time that he was in the cabin. And so when Travis was talking about the wound, he's like, yeah, like, I don't know how I got it. I don't know if it was something I got that day working, like cutting down the trees. I don't know if it's something that happened when I was gone for 5 days, like on the craft. Like he didn't know. He was like, I have no idea where it came from. But again, if you remember, there were no drugs in his system. So like Philip Klass's theory or allegation of, well, he was just shooting up LSD, like there was no proof, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Steve Pierce, this young guy, they kept going after him, right? Because he's like the youngest one. So he had said that in 1980, Philip Klass offered him $10,000. Gabby, can you do the conversion? I forgot to do it.
Yeah.
What's the conversion? $10,000 in 1980 to today's money.
Okay.
So he tried to get him to say that it was a lie. And Steve Pierce in this documentary was like, that was a lot of money. I was like young, like things weren't going so great for me. Like I could have used the money, you know?
10,000 in 1980 is equivalent in purchasing power to about 37,000. 37,000. Jesus.
I was like,
Wait, she hasn't been in school for a while.
It's like, whoa.
37,000.
37,000.
Mm-hmm.
I would think it would be more, but I mean, even
That's
the
what I
rate's
thought
like
too.
3 times. $10,000 now is a good chunk of money.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there were some thoughts that maybe this Philip Klass guy was connected to the CIA and that he was kind of like hired to debunk like any kinds of UFO claims. And they had also said like he didn't have money. So where was he going to get this
Ooh.
$10,000 that he was offering Steve Pierce if he didn't have money, right? So they kind of thought maybe he was connected to the CIA somehow. And there was some other talk in the documentary about, they had a picture of like, what's his name? J. Edgar Hoover, the
Mhm.
old guy. Not the old guy.
president? The president?
No.
Wasn't he a
There was a
president?
picture. No, the guy that ran the FBI.
No, I know, but it wasn't Hoover a president?
Herbert Hoover was a president, I think.
Oh, then who was the one you just
J.
talked
Edgar
about?
Hoover was the guy that ran the FBI back when the Kennedys were
No, okay.
around.
I
So
feel
there
like
was
I
a
should know
picture
that.
of,
Why did I mean I know the name sounds familiar. I was like, wait.
that is his name, right? J. Edgar Hoover?
That's what I anyways, okay.
Yeah.
We'll figure that out.
Google it. And there was a picture of him with the Kennedys. So they had kind of talked a little bit more about this possible like CIA connection, but I didn't write it down because it kind of bored me.
Yeah.
So then,
You're right.
Right,
Former
J. Edgar Hoover.
director of the FBI.
yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio played him in a movie.
Oh, okay.
So Travis Walton wrote the book, Fire in the Sky. He wrote it in 1978, but I think he wrote a second one, maybe. I might be wrong. And then eventually the movie came out in 1993. So the script got like shopped around a bunch of times, right? And eventually they said, well, like Travis's story is like a little too fuzzy and it's really similar to other stories that we've heard on TV. So they got this screenwriter to write like a flashier, more provocative kind of story. And so that's what ended up being the actual film that came out. And so they started filming in 1992. And so there was this other UFO investigator debunker that heard about the movie being filmed, and he was also connected to Philip Klass at some point. And so he was like, you guys like don't make this movie. This is a lie. Like this whole story is a hoax. Like don't film the movie. And he wanted everybody to get retested because he's like, well, everybody passed and that was so long ago. If you're going to do this movie, then everybody should do more polygraphs. And
Again?
so again,
Like how many times?
and I don't remember how many they had taken at that point. I think Travis said in total he's taken 5,
And
maybe.
they all came out positive, like he passed, right? Yeah.
He passed all of them except for the one inconclusive that they did, days or
you
weeks
just-
after.
You just don't get that with a polygraph test. Like that's just not
Right.
possible.
Right. So the movie came out in 1993, and about a month before it came out, Travis, Mike, and Alan all retook the tests. They were kind of reluctant, but they were like, fine. And Travis actually said at this point he took 2 tests. And so it was kind of like, well, we have like nothing to gain here. Like this movie's coming out in a month. And so if they would have not passed the test, like that movie wouldn't have come out. right? So they were like, it wasn't for any benefit of us to do it, but they did it anyway, right? I mean, if anything, it just made them more credible. But like, if they were lying, do you think they would have taken it?
After all this time, though, too, like so many hurdles.
Right. So all three of them passed again. And again, they all passed to like the highest degree that you can pass. And so those three were kind of the more well-known of the seven, right? Because Travis was the main guy. Mike was his boss and friend and the one that was kind of in charge of the crew. And then Ellen Dallas, because he was so controversial and, had like his own reputation. And everybody else was kind of, they weren't really out there too much. Some of them were trying to separate themselves, right? Some of them had moved.
Mhm.
Travis never moved. Like he stayed in the town that he was from. And he had also said, and I'm kind of guessing here. Let me go back up to the names. So he had said that some of the guys were kind of not jealous, but they had some like feelings of maybe resentment because even though they were there, people didn't want to talk to them, right? Like they would pass them by to go talk to like Travis or to talk to Mike. And so there was some kind of issues there with some of them. I think, and again, I don't know. And I don't know who's still alive or not. I know some of them who are still alive, but I think maybe Dwayne Smith was one of the people that wasn't thrilled about all the attention he was getting because he was never talked about. It was hard to even kind of find his name. And then Ken Peterson, they talked about him being like a really nice kind of like church guy, like just very good-hearted. So I don't think it was him, but I think it was Dwayne Smith. Maybe John Goulet and maybe Steve Pierce, but like they're fine now. Like there were in the documentary I was watching, Steve Pierce and Travis were like filming together, and obviously John Goulet was there talking about it. So I think maybe though at some point they weren't super cool about it.
Well, that's kind of lame because then would the opposite or whatever the other end of the spectrum would be to be like getting abducted. So I'm sure they wouldn't have enjoyed that experience by the sounds of it.
Right.
Jealousy is so interesting.
So when he's talked about it now, Travis has said, like, I think that the reason I was taken on the craft is because, like, I think they were trying to help me. He's like, I think when I got hit by the light, like, they were maybe, like, scared that they had killed me. So he thinks that the fact that he was taken aboard and revived and then returned, like, unharmed it's kind of like his proof of, like, yeah, like, I don't think they were malicious. I don't think they were like intentionally, they didn't come to abduct him, right? He got like hit and then like, oh shit, like we need to revive this guy. And so again, the stories haven't changed, right? They've like all kind of stayed the same. They were talking about some like physical evidence involving the trees. So if you remember, they were in the forest. And so they went back in like 2014 to go just kind of like test the trees. And there were some trees that they said were producing like wood fiber at like 36 times the normal rate, which they said had like, so they also looked at the rings like in the tree. And they said there was like a swelling and a thickening of the rings of the trees that were in the area of where the incident happened, like where he got zapped. And they attributed it to like radiation.
Wow.
And so they said that the only other time that they've seen that is the trees that were in the, I I can never say this word, Chernobyl.
Yeah.
Chernobyl.
The trees in the Chernobyl area also had similar patterns. So a lot of radiation there. So that was like one of the physical evidence findings that they're just like, okay, like explain this then, right? If this didn't happen, why are these trees growing this way? So I thought that was kind of interesting. Let me move this down.
I'm like totally enthralled. I'm just like, and then what happened?
Okay, so nothing much more happened. So he got regressed. He got regressed, and he said he was able to recount like the memories like almost entirely. And the doctor that regressed him initially had said that his recall of the incident was almost identical to another subject that he had regressed, which he said the findings of that regression like weren't published, like there was no record of it, but he said there was like so much similarities in the way they described everything. So that was kind of interesting that the stories kind of matched up. Not kind of matched up, but they matched up pretty closely. And then at one point, yes.
Can I show you that there's a Mario movie too?
No, there's not. I'll come like in 5 minutes.
I'll take a picture and then I'll send it to you
Good idea.
right now.
Okay.
Can I put Supersonic somewhere safe?
I will put him somewhere safe in a little bit. You're being so good. I'm almost done. Okay. So then at one point when he was being regressed, the facilitator had to stop because Travis started like freaking out. And he was like, if I go any further, like I'm going to die. And so he never said why, like if he had a fear of like maybe saying too much and then them finding out, or if he just went that deep into it. Like he didn't really talk about what it was, but he said like, I have no desire to remember anymore. I have no desire to go any further. And then he had also said like, I don't know what the benefit would be. And he's like, I don't even think I would tell anybody. So if I did, like I would never share what else would come through, right? It would just be like him and the facilitator that would know. And he's like, so in one of the interviews, the guy had asked like, oh, well, I think he said like, so you could know now and you would never tell. And he's like, yeah, like I would never tell any more details. Like that's just enough. So it kind of made me wonder like, what else, right? What else was there? Hold on.
I believe him.
I do too. I'm just like, wow. I believe it. There's so many things.
Okay, so the movie came out March 12th, 1993. And on that day, Travis Walton, Mike Rogers, and Philip Klass, the guy that kept trying to say they were lying, were on the Larry King live show. And I didn't look to see if there were any interviews that I could find, but they all came out on the show that day. And then he did an episode on the Joe Rogan Experience, and that one I couldn't find. I found little clips, but I couldn't find the whole interview. Did something happen with the Joe Rogan show?
I don't know.
Not that I know
Like, was he
of.
flagged and like they take off videos off of YouTube because there's information that we're not supposed to know, which was happening a lot.
No,
in
like, did
2020.
he get in trouble for something? I had heard that a bunch of his shows, that like 30 some episodes were removed for like racial slurs he was making.
Oh shit, I didn't know that.
And then the Joe Rogan Experience, like I couldn't find it on Apple anymore, and they had a Joe Rogan Experience AI, and it's like what we think the interviews with these people would be like. So I don't know, but then I read like maybe some of them went to like subscription only. So I wasn't sure, but he did a recent one with Joe Rogan and I couldn't find it.
Like
Excuse me.
recently?
2021.
I just find it interesting how like he recently did that in 2021 and we have all this alien stuff coming out. Like
So
Yeah.
okay, so
come on, another thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the year of the aliens.
Well, I'm almost done. I'm going to get to that too. So let's see. He did a lie detector show. I guess Fox had this show called Moment of Truth. I don't remember when it was. It might have been like late 2010s. And so he's like, yeah, I'll do the show. You know, like I've done these lie detector tests before, like fine. So they asked him, you know, were you abducted? He said yes. And then the show said he was lying. Well, come to find out, the show got sued because they did a bunch of like research into the show and they were saying like everybody lied. So some woman was on there and said she like wasn't cheating on her husband, but it said she was lying. So the show was just like doing a lot of like deceitful kind of things. So they ended up getting sued by a bunch of people. So he was like, so they were trying to say, you see, like it's a lie. Like he didn't actually get abducted.
Wow.
Yeah. And then let's see. Okay. I don't need to share that part. So I think I mentioned Travis stayed in the same town that he was from. It was called Snowflake, Arizona. But he like lost his job. He said like he was ridiculed. He's like, yeah, everywhere I went, like people knew me and either believed me or didn't believe me, right? He was like the crazy guy in town. And he was like, you know, a lot of opportunities that may have been available to me in my lifetime, like weren't anymore, right? So he had a very different life than he would have had he like never come out with it. And then it was funny because Steve Pierce, the young guy, was in this documentary that I was watching. And he was like, yeah, you know, I have this brother and he's like super educated. He's like a professor. And, you know, he doesn't really necessarily believe these things because to him, he's like, well, why would they abduct? Why wouldn't they abduct like intelligent people like me, right? Like a professor. And why are they taking rednecks? And it was so funny because Steve Pierce was like, can I say that? And then Travis is like, rednecks? Like, yeah, you can say rednecks. He's like, oh, okay. But you know, I've also thought that before, right?
Mhm.
Like, okay, if these people are being abducted, why are the people that are being abducted more like country kind of
Mhm.
people? Anyway, so that thought has also crossed my mind. So when I was listening to interviews, I listened to a couple interviews from Art Bell. Do you guys know who Art Bell is?
Mm-mm.
Oh, Art Bell. If he were around now, you guys would be all about him. Like he was like talking about all this stuff like years ago. Like he had this late night show, this like AM radio show.
Oh, the radio guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, Nicole, you took me back to like the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I listened to 2 Art Bell interviews for this episode. And he had mentioned like he had also had some sightings and he's like, I didn't know if I wanted to tell people like because of my job, right? I didn't want to like be ridiculed because as it was, like his job was already, you know, kind of like teetering the line of
For that time
right,
it was. Yeah.
right. So yeah, Travis is like, if I wouldn't have been abducted, I would have never said anything. Like I would have never said what we saw because he's like, we got so much like scrutiny and ridicule. We were treated so poorly. Like I would have never said anything. And Yeah, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why would you? Why would you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, to be famous?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
I kind of feel like even if he did it to be famous, that truth would have came out all these years.
Right. Right.
And it didn't.
Yeah. So they also talked about the documentary was talking about this like disinformation and the government's inability to admit to UFOs, or what do they call now, UAPs?
UAPs,
Mhm.
yeah.
And one of the guys in there said, I don't think there's going to be disclosure in my lifetime, which I thought was really interesting because we just had that congressional hearing and it's
Mhm.
kind of coming out a little bit more.
Yeah.
And Travis had kind of talked to like humans and abilities to be told about ETs, because he's like, if people knew what was happening, like our society would stop functioning. People wouldn't go to work the next day. Like they wouldn't know what to do. Like people cannot handle
Mm-hmm.
what is really happening. And for that reason, like they'll never be told what's actually happening.
Yep. That
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense. I think Elizabeth and I had the discussion about this where it's like literally like certain people are activated, aka us, aka the healers, to raise a vibration, because then we in turn prepare the next influx of people that need that. Because think about it, people would literally lose their fucking shit from one day to
Mhm.
the next. Like, I mean, like think about how bad 2020 was. Like people could not function, like the riots and everything.
Right.
So I totally fucking get it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so the documentary just ended with like a couple statistics. And so it said in 2013, there were 13,000 sightings that were reported in just the US and Canada alone. So who knows what else is being seen in other parts of the world. And they said out of those, though, like less than 1 in 10 people actually report that there were the sightings. Like people just aren't saying anything, right? Because well, I'm going to be made fun of, or people are going to,
Wow.
right?
You know, it makes me wonder too, because I'm like, okay, well, maybe we're looking at this from like another perspective. Like maybe the aliens are here just to help us, or maybe they're just here to have fun. But then, from our guy friends from the podcast Beyond the Shadows,
Mhm.
yeah, I didn't say that too confidently, but
No.
you can edit that out.
Because sometimes I say beyond. I think one time I said behind, and they're like, close enough.
Yeah. Go listen to their podcast, guys. But
They
they
did
had
an
made
episode on this too.
yeah, they did, and they posted David Grush, the guy that did
Mhm.
was the whistleblower. Yeah, he was a whistleblower.
Yeah.
Words are escaping me at this time, guys. It's been a long weekend, but you know, they had shared that they released his health records. So it's like,
Yep.
well, why would they do that? Like, why are they trying to distract? I don't know. I really go back and forth about what narrative they're trying to build, because at this point we should be questioning everything and not believing immediately outright what stories are out there,
Well,
regardless of the topic.
he also called that and said that that was going to
Yeah,
happen.
he did.
So
Yeah, they did.
doesn't look good for them that they did that. So the other statistic was since November of 1975, because remember this happened November 5th, 1975. So there's been over 92,000 sightings.
Yeah.
But they said this one is still the most like well documented case of abduction.
And why is that? Like, why aren't they documenting them?
You know, the other thing too, like with cell phones and everybody pulling out their cell phones for everything, I have to wonder, like, why don't we have a very clear, clear video even to this
Mhm.
day? Not saying that they don't exist, but like, where is that disconnect right there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my husband has said that too. And I think my thought goes back to in the moment, are you thinking that, or are you
No.
so stuck in the moment, or is there maybe mind control going on where they're like, no, you're not going to do that, or are the men in black showing up?
Well, then there's also like the idea that, okay, if we have any type of conflict with aliens, most of the bad ones, I'm sure that there are good and bad ones, because I truly believe that. We're fucked. Like humans are fucking dumb compared to the level of evolvement that those beings are at. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
I don't mean to disrespect anyone that's listening out there, but it's true. Like we
They're
don't stand a fucking
dumb.
chance. We're done. Yes.
I have to wonder too, speaking of like mind control, like kind of being the devil's advocate, because
Please
so
do.
many people are afraid of ridicule that like the
Yeah.
peer pressure alone is enough to like quiet somebody to like because they don't want to be in the loony bill like the loony bin. They don't want to lose their job. They have like family to support. And like what you were saying about that show, The Factor of Fiction, I think it was, or even just
Moment of
planting
truth.
moment of truth, like even just planting the seed of like, nope, totally false. Like you said it and you planted it. Doesn't matter if they're getting sued like legally. There's that thread kind of still remains. So, after all these years to go through so many polygraph tests, so much scrutiny, lose your life, not physical, but just like
No, your quality
your
and
life.
like you
Yeah.
said, all the opportunities that he could have had.
Yeah, and so to see somebody who's well documented and then see that his life was lost and like ravaged, I'd be like, I don't think I want to say anything. There's
Yeah.
there's
And
a
then
lot there.
but then that makes me wonder too, because we're all in this work and we all are we know, like, what if that was his part of what he came here to do, was to like open up that conversation, like what if that was one of his main missions? Because people do have main missions to make contact with them and to work with them, whatever
I
that
think
looks like.
that goes to the point of like him continuing to tell a story over and over and over
Yes,
again.
the same one.
Well, and the thing is too, he doesn't do like a lot of interviews. So, right, he did Art Bell because Art Bell was huge. He did Larry King because Larry King. And then he did, a couple like immediately after, but he doesn't do a lot, right? I mean, the ones that he does do are like bigger ones, right? Joe Rogan. But he's not doing interview after interview after interview like all over the place. And when he does, his story doesn't change.
Yeah.
Ooh, and that kind of like what comes up for me too, like what Gabby said. The idea of like soul work and your soul comes down like on a mission. Like maybe it was like, all right, I'm in it. Like I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna go through this experience, and like rather than disseminate the information in every single outlet, you have the key ones that just the big ones that trickle down, and people could be talking about it over lunch like, oh, did you hear that story? But they're still talking about it. They're still processing it. They're still kind of thinking, what if there really are aliens? And maybe that's the awakening.
Yeah. So I just wanted to end it with a quote that was at the end of the documentary, and it said, "Evidence continues to accumulate that we may not be alone in the universe. We may not even be alone here on Earth." And I just thought of that interview when I saw that pop up on the screen where David Grush talked about the fact that they might not be coming in from other planets, that they might be in a parallel dimension here on Earth, which still fucks me up because I've mentioned it so many times. But that reminded me of that when I saw that, and I was like, yeah. And this documentary that I watched, it was done in the 2010s. It was, I think, initially released in like 2015 and then re-released maybe in 2019 with a couple of updates. But it wasn't that long ago. So anyways, what do you guys think? You guys think it was true? Do you think it happened?
Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
Beyond the Shadows does a scale of like 1 to 10 on like believability. So 1, like I don't believe it. 10, I totally believe it. Where would you guys rate it?
10.
10. I totally believe it.
Isn't
like
it wild?
I do. It's so
Like,
fantastical. Like it is wild for sure, but like there's just so many things, especially in today's day and age where like so many people are being like canceled and like cross-examined and interrogated and like looking like nothing's popped up on him.
Yeah. So anyway, that is my favorite alien abduction story. Travis Walton.
I also kind of like that maybe the aliens were nice in this story. Like
Yeah,
they,
me too.
they because
Well,
I mean like
yeah, he said that a couple times. He goes, initially, like, yeah, I was freaked the fuck out. Like, I was terrified. He goes, but as I've had time to reflect, right, like, throughout the periods of the interviews, 30 years later, 40 years later, now almost 50 years later, he's like I wasn't harmed. Like, I was brought back. Like, I really think that they thought they killed me, and I think they were trying to revive me. So he's
Mhm.
like, I don't think that they were malicious.
Like, I have to wonder too, because I've heard stories like with alien abductions that people get like physical symptoms after getting abducted, and he's been going on like 50 years and he's okay. Like, and especially with the trees like resonating with that radioactivity, because that seems to be very prominent with the stories I've heard. And so, I think they like nursed him back to health and then they let him go.
So I can't remember which interview it was that I was listening to, because I listened to another interview with him like months ago before I even started doing this. And they were asking about like psychic abilities, like if he's had any, if he has any, or something to that effect. And he wouldn't outright say yes, but he wouldn't outright say no. And I think it goes back to the ridicule where he's like, people already make fun of me and I already get so much shit. And I wish I could remember which interview it was, but he was kind of alluding to the fact that maybe he does have some abilities that he thinks are due to this. And he's also said that he's seen more UAPs. Like it wasn't just this time. But again, it also speaks to the location where they're saying out there, right? You're out in the desert. I mean, anytime we leave the city, like you can just see all the stars, like just so much more than we can see them out here. So he said he saw one time with his son and maybe like his son's girlfriend or something, but he's like, yeah, like it's not like it just happened once. Like I've seen it since then also.
It just kind of fucks me up for like my alien encounters. I mean, like, I want to be only working with the light and the good ones and whatever that contact looks like. I don't want to go up to the spacecraft, but like, this shit is so fucking real. It's like, it's real. And if
Yeah.
you think we're the only ones on Earth, people, human beings are the only types of existence to be out there. Like, it's not the case.
Mm-mm.
I just like there's like a healthy skepticism too for me where I'm like, listen, I believe in you aliens, but not over here. Like you can stay over there. If I saw a craft, I would not run towards it. Like I'd be like, I see you over there. I'm gonna go that way. Like I'm just gonna say we never saw.
And they asked him like, why did you run towards it? And he's like, he was 22 when it happened. I don't think I mentioned that at the beginning. He was young. He's like,
yeah.
I was just wanting to like get closer to it before it like left. Like I just wanted to see what it was. Like he wasn't thinking, oh, I'm gonna get abducted or I want to be abducted. He was just like, what is this? This is like spectacular. I need to have a closer look. You know, in 22,
like, nope.
your brain's not fully developed. So there's that.
True.
Yeah.
Man.
So anyway, you guys watch the movie. Oh, so there were a couple of things that they talked about as far as the movie. Just little changes. So one was there was a part in the like the beginning of the movie where they're showing all the guys in the truck and like they're reading a National Enquirer and there's like a story on there about like alien abductions. So they were trying to like allude to, oh, see, these guys like made it up. Like they were drunk and they were like, oh, like what kind of story can we make up? So they were like, that never happened. Like we never had a magazine in the car. And then they had combined characters. So like Travis had two brothers, one who believed what had happened and one who thought that they had killed him. So they combined the brothers. I think the brothers' name were like Dwayne and Don, and then they made it one brother Dan in the movie just to like make things easier. And then they only had 6 members of the crew instead of 7. So again, just to like make things not as confusing.
I have to wonder too, like why they made the movie. Not like they, as in the people who got abducted, but like the studio heads. Because there's the whole like conspiracy theory of like the CIA controls it. Like I wonder if that was like an element of like control, like damage control, where it's like, all right, we're gonna do it, but it's gonna be like so fantastical that people are gonna think it's fake.
What was almost 20 years ago or 20 years after the fact?
And that too, that they're making it like so many
in the
years
90s.
later.
Yeah. Well, and then he had also said that So there were just a couple other little things that like weren't accurate, right? Like a lot of it was Hollywood, and he was saying, these things like in the initial script that was run by him, he's like, it wasn't in there like that. But he's like, I didn't have any creative control. Like I had no legal claim to anything. Like they consulted with him, right? Like he was a consultant for the movie, but he's like, I couldn't say like, no, that didn't happen. Like you can't do that. But yeah, I mean, he said it was just shopped around so much. Now, once they got to the last person, they were like, all right, this is what it's going to be.
Wow.
But it's a good movie. It was one of my favorite movies as a kid. I'm going to link all of the interviews that I listened to. I'm going to link the documentary because it's only like an hour and 20 minutes. It was really good.
I love that this is your favorite movie, like Aliens.
I know. I'm like,
well, not my favorite
like you're the
movie,
one that like I don't want to see anything, I don't want to know anything, but aliens exist.
When I was younger, this was one of my favorite movies. So when I was younger, Coming to America was like my favorite movie too, which I shouldn't have been watching. And this one, like these were just, it was so good. Like it was such a fascinating movie. And I never was like, oh, that didn't happen. Like I saw that movie and believed it as truth. And I like have never not believed this story. And it's always been my favorite.
I always heard that like growing up, whatever you're interested in, like really interested, there was like a tie to it in a past life.
So yeah, I've always been really fascinated with like space and things like that. When we were
terrified of water.
When we were coming back yesterday from the trip, I was watching Interstellar because I'd seen it once before, but I watched it again and I was like, this movie's fucking crazy.
I can't watch that, like stuff like that. It fucks me up. Like the idea.
So good though.
Of dying in space.
The
wormhole. You can't fucking
wormhole.
breathe. Oh fuck.
But the wormhole, and then he came back. I was like crying. I was like watching the movie, and I was just like, and my husband looked at me, and he was like, "What's going on?" And I was like,
You don't understand.
It's like a parent and a child, and anytime it's a parent and a child, it just gets me. And he was just like, "What the fuck?" Yeah, it was just bad. I was just like, awful. But it's such a good movie. Yeah,
and see his daughter, and like his daughter, and his like
she's
it was
like
all that
90.
time.
Yeah, and he's all hot still. And I'm like, that's so fucking weird, but that's his daughter. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all I got. Elizabeth, where can people find you if they want to also experience a great reading with you?
Yeah, totally open for it. I have a Calendly link on my Instagram. So my Instagram handle is BeYourselfEJ, which is my initials. And yeah, my reading is, I call it the illumination reading. So I basically help illuminate the path if people are feeling stuck in their life journey and they don't know which way to go. I basically am like a little bit of a flashlight to kind of be like, hey, look, this is your blind spot here. These are your talents over here, and how you could apply it like in your life already, like from day one. So yeah, if you guys,
she's so good.
Thank
so
you.
Good.
Yeah. I'm totally
Human
blushing
flashlight.
too. Human flashlight. Yep. Just kind of illuminating your way, and you know, especially when things are dark or you can't see something about yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll include it all for you. We went way over our time. We keep doing that. I'm like breaking my own rules of an hour.
It was a good story though. I believe it. I want to read the book because I always feel like the books are better than the movies. So I go straight for that first.
I do too. I'll include a link to the book too.
I'm also kind of scared though, because I'm like, every time I feel like I delve into there, I'm just like, I'm gonna read this book about aliens, but that doesn't mean you can come for me, aliens. Like, no.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay, guys, we'll see you next time. I don't know what we're doing next time. We have so much going on, and my brain is a little bit mushy still. So thank you, Elizabeth, for hanging out with us.
Thanks. I had so much fun playing with you girls. It was great.
You're welcome anytime, friend. Our maverick friend.
Yeah.
I feel like there's more to come.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay, guys. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.